Hey, it's Rob, and welcome to Axel's Garage. Out here with Cosmo today. This is a 2000 Jeep Cherokee. It's an XJ, and this is the one that Steven has been driving, the little big dummy. He's been driving around for a while, even though this will eventually go to Emily. We got Steve-O's that we're still working on before we hand it off to him. It needs a lot more work than this one did. So this one runs real well, and we did some videos on the AC and got the AC going. So they've been using it. Last week, they were going to the beach. So they get off the highway, or for those that are in New York, get off the Parkway, and he said the brakes went to the floor. So he called me up, he goes, the brakes went to the floor, the car still stopped, so I turned the air conditioning off and it remained the same. So we want Steve-O to stay in school because turning the air conditioning off is not going to have anything to do with the brakes there, Steve-O. So anyway, I told him to look outside the car and see if he sees anything coming out onto the ground, any kind of fluid. And he did, and he said it's in the middle of the car. I think it's the air conditioning drip, and you know, it'll condensate. So I said, he made him put me on FaceTime in the middle of the car on the driver's side, right pretty much between the rear door and the front door meet, you know, favoring the driver's side, a mess. I said, touch it, see if it's oily, and he touched it. He goes, yeah, it's kind of weird. So it wasn't the condensate, because we know the condensate's on the passenger side, Steve-O. And brake line, of course. So he drove some side streets for another couple minutes until he could get a spot to park, and they went to the beach. And I drove down there and swapped cars with him and drove this back home. You know, in these, when that front to rear brake line goes, you know, you lose a lot of your pedal goes down because there's less fluid in there, but the master is able to still send pressure to the front wheel so you can stop with your front wheel. So stopping is a little bit more labor intensive, low pedal, and you know, you only have front brakes, your rear brakes aren't doing anything. So it, you know, beats up your front brakes a little bit, but I was able to get it home, get a brake line kit ordered up, and the easiest way to get these is just to buy the whole kit. It's like 110 bucks. I'll link it below, and you get every single line. I think it's a Dorman kit. You get every single line in the vehicle, which is great. You can swap them all out, or you can just do the one that broke, which is what we're gonna do, because it looks like the rear axle lines have been replaced, and one of the lines in the front going to the front passenger side wheel looks like that was replaced. So right now we're just going to do the front to rear line so we can get him going, and if need be we have to replace the other lines we have. So, and with two of these vehicles, I'm sure we're going to be going through other brake lines, probably wind up eventually changing all of them and buying another set for the other one and changing all of them as well, because these do tend to rot out, especially up here in the Northeast. So we got this front to rear line. It ships, you know, in a box, so they bend it and they put tags on it, and they'll say shipping bend straighten between tags. So you know, like this little bend right here, you just need to straighten out, and we got another one up here. Sometimes if you buy it for a different application, it'll say, you know, bend to a 90 or a 45 or whatever between the tags. But a lot of the times they'll use a straight section and they'll say just straighten it out between the two tags that are on there. So you got to figure out by looking at it which is your front side and your back side. This one actually has a little, and it's the same with the original. I'm not sure the reason for it, but it's got a little zigzag that was going to join with a union right before the proportioning valve. So this one goes from the proportioning valve to the rear brake hose, and then on the back end this is going to the brake hose. The only thing that concerns me is it's a regular, you know, double flare or inverted flare, however you call it, on this one and on this one that goes, you know, towards the front of the vehicle. But the one that goes towards the back of the vehicle is actually a bubble flare, and I'll show you the bubble flare there. So I'm hoping that it's supposed to be a bubble flare at that end, otherwise they just might have forgot to put the second flare in. I'm hoping that's not the case, but we'll see when we take it out. The only thing I've really done to prepare is I crawled underneath. This is the first time I'm even looking underneath, because I knew it was that brake line. It's the only place brake fluid could leak from. And the line's completely rotted. I'm surprised it's not leaking from multiple places. So what I did was I crawled underneath and I used some penetrating oil. I used Seafoam Deep Creep. And I'll show you that right here, the Deep Creep. I like this because it clings more. And so because it clings, it creeps. So when you're spraying it, especially upside down on fittings, you're not just spraying it on the fitting and then it's all running off. Yes, some will drip off, but you could see it's a little foamy and it sort of creeps in there. So I sprayed all the fittings around the proportioning valve and the master just in case we have to change any others in the future. Then I went down and I sprayed it at the other end. I also used a little wire brush to clean off around the bleeder screw and the connections at the wheel, because we know we're gonna have to bleed them out at the 2 rear wheels. So I wanted to get a little penetrating oil on there. I also hit the parking brake cable mechanism because we might have to pull that down to sneak the cable up. But the first thing I'm going to do is get the old cable out, old brake line out, and then see how we can unbend the new one while getting it up into place, because you can't just unbend it and throw it up, because you have, you know, some things that interfere with it that you have to get it up and over. And you also have your transmission or your transfer case cross member that is connected to the chassis, so you have to snake it over it. Otherwise you're gonna have to unbolt the cross member and drop it down just a little bit so that you can put the line in between. And I'll try to get the camera down there and show you exactly what we're talking about. And without further ado, I'm gonna crawl under this and try to pull the old one out. So up and under, you can see I sprayed back there by the bleeder and that connection. I sprayed over at the connection. If we could get it to the light to come in. There we go. I sprayed it at the connection where the brake hose meets the junction for the 2 axle lines. And then our front to rear brake line is going to be right up in that bracket there. And I sprayed that down really well too. And that line runs along the chassis rail. Now it runs behind the assembly for the parking brake. And you can see I sprayed all this down too, just to give that a little lube. And then it runs right over the chassis rail, over the cross member there, and towards the front, and then up by the master. So I'm gonna start pulling this down, and we'll see how we do. So this back line came out relatively easy, and when I disconnected it, it allowed air into the system, which, if you could see here, is allowing the remaining residual fluid a chance to come out and drip out, and you can see it dripping right there. That's where the leak is, and that's exactly where the little big dummy showed me on FaceTime when he was on the side of the road. Alright, so loosening the parking brake contraption there off the bottom of the frame allowed the rotted line to drop down. And what I also did down on this end was I just took the bolts off for the cross member. If I could get it to adjust for the light, there we go. I took the bolts down for the cross member, dropped the cross member just a little bit, and we're going to be able to slide the brake line out, which will be nice because now it's going to come in and out in one flat piece, so we don't have to worry about bending and rebending. We can straighten out the bends and slide it all right in. Alright, so doing it that way, I was able to get the line out in one piece without bending it or anything, so I know that how I'm going to be able to fish my new one up and in. It turns out that one end that had a little bit of a bubble flare on it is actually the end that goes into that little zigzag at the proportioning valve. The other end is pretty standard, and it doesn't use that union. I guess that union is for 2 other hoses in the kit. So the zigzag itself has your bottom piece that will go up into the proportioning valve with a regular double flare or inverted flare, and then this one has this fitting attached to it that will take the bubble flare end, and this is exactly the way the factory one is set up also. Now I can take my bent new brake line and straighten it out nice and easy. Just carefully with your thumbs. Maybe up against your body sometimes helps a little bit. And try to just get it fairly straight between the bends. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then you got a fairly straight. So now we could lay this out compared to the factory one. it actually has more distinct bends on it on the end going up towards the master cylinder. You can see here. So I wonder if this is a replacement that was a straight line that was bent by a mechanic, because this is definitely doesn't have these rigid bends that this one has. We'll see. What I am going to do is I am going to take some blue masking tape and I'm going to tape the fittings up so that they stay at the end and that nothing gets in them as I'm installing them, because it is, you know, rusty and greasy down there as I'm trying to snake it up through. So I'm going to do that. My plan of action is to snake it up towards the master and then lay it in over the transmission cross member towards the back. That's the way it came out, and I think that's the best way for it to go in. Took the airbox out, made it a lot easier to give me some room here. So this is where it's gonna wind up going. It's about right here, and then that little extension zigzag has got to go on it. So take my blue tape off. These Dorman kits are made in China, but they actually have real decent reviews. I think what I'm going to do is just leave this like this, because I know it's close, and I'm going to go underneath, and I got the line actually going down towards the middle of the car. I could flap it that way, which will turn this to the right orientation, hopefully. I'm not tightening all these down all the way. This one I should be able to get at if I got to give this one another little schmutz, but let me make sure that I'm not tangled in something down there before I run it all the way back and tighten it up. All right, so after getting it loosely attached up here, went down underneath, routed the cable through all the clips and everything, the cable line through all the clips and everything, and got it loosely attached in the back. Then I worked my way from the back all the way forward, sort of straightening and adjusting the bends in it, because the bends weren't perfect out of the box. So sort of adjusting and straightening everything so that the brake line laid into the little brackets and clips along the chassis rail. Nice, and then I worked my way all the way back up to here, and then I tightened at the proportioning valve, and I tightened that little junction in that zigzag fitting. Now all we need to do is go underneath, tighten it in the back, put our parking brake mechanism back up and our transmission crossmember back up, and then bleed the brakes. Let me show you. It actually looks really good down below, and I'll take the camera down there and show you. So down here, you can see it runs nice along the chassis rail. I didn't take all the labels off. Nobody's gonna see them. And it runs all the way back, right up into the brake hose. And what I'm going to do is tighten up that back fitting, and then I'm going to spray both the fuel line and this brake line down with some corrosion inhibitor that I just happen to have on the shelf. It's a PB Blaster version of fluid film. So I'll spray this on there, so hopefully it won't rot anymore, and or at least delay the rotting process. And then we'll get the cross member back up and this parking brake mechanism back up, and we can start the bleed. Alright, so at the passenger rear wheel, I got my wrench on the bleeder screw. I got my one-man bleeder contraption. I got my tape mark where my fluid load is was after. So what I did was I cracked the bleeder open with this connected. I went in there and I pumped it 10 times. Then I refilled the master and pumped it another 10 times. Let it sit for a couple minutes, and then pumped it 5 more times. And now I have all nice, you can see clear fluid coming through. And my level in here went up. I put the piece of tape so I knew where my level was. So my level's up, and I got clear fluid through. I can't tell if I have any bubbles coming out, but I don't think I do, because I don't see any in the lines. It would be getting trapped in the high spot. So I think we are good. I am going to tighten the bleeder up, pull my one-man bleeder off and do the same thing to the driver's side rear wheel. So I checked all my connections and my bleeder screws, make sure nothing's leaking. I sprayed the anti-corrosive spray over the stuff I wanted to, topped off the brake juice in the master cylinder, and everything seems to be operating as it should. I'm happy with it. Let me tell you, for a Dorman product, the brake line kit was pretty good. I'm going to save the other lines. I'm sure I'm going to blow a line here or there. All the rest of the lines look fairly decent, except for the one that goes from the proportioning valve back along the firewall and then down to the passenger side wheel. That one seems to be the next one that'll probably go, but that is going to be a pain in the neck to fish it through, because you got to take all the wiring bundles back here and kind of move them because it slips down behind it. So that'll be a little bit of a pain in the ass for another day. What I did notice was that I still had it up in the air, was running it and putting my foot on the brake, making sure they was stopping. The right rear was stopping great, left rear not so much. So I know that I'm in the position where we're going to need to do rear brakes on this, which we had planned anyway. The stuff, I would have done it today, do it when we're doing our lines and bleeding everything, but the stuff wasn't available locally, so we'll have to order it in. The Dorman kit I'll link in the description below. I'll also link a commercially available one-man bleeder in the description below. This one, however, is working great, and I will link a video right up here on how we set this up and used it the first time, and it actually works great. Easy way to bleed and flush out your old brake fluid. Hope you enjoyed the video today, and as always, thanks for watching.